Hartford's new mayor. Next. Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. Make it a point to drop it every week. Pedro Segarra is Hartford's new mayor. The council president's ascension is a result of the corruption conviction of Eddie Perez. In his first extended TV interview since his promotion, Segarra talks about his new life and his plans to restore trust and confidence to a capital city in crisis. Welcome to the show. We had you on a few weeks back. A few weeks ago you were Pedro. Now you're the mayor. Welcome.
Well, now I'm Mayor Pedro. Yes. Thank you for having me.
How are you feeling? I mean, are you used to hearing the term entitled mayor?
It's still, taking some getting used to, but it's an office, and I have to do it justice and continue the work.
Kind of an awkward way to come into office on the heels of a corruption situation. After the conviction, tell me how many days afterwards did the old mayor, call you? What did he say, and what did you say?
Well, initially we were trying to, after the guilty verdict, we were trying to work. I think it was very clear from that day that he was going to resign. I think that what we were trying to do is coordinate a date to afford some sort of transition, as well as to also transition myself out of a law practice. I think as the pressure mounted, and I think as he had to deal with the reality of his appeal, and also the pressures of nurturing his family and being available to his family, the date was accelerated. And at some point, we just realized that, and he realized that it was probably in best of his interest and my interest to accelerate the date. And he finally made the decision that he wanted to get back to his family, continue to work on his appeal. And I then became mayor on the 25th of June.
But there's the official talk and that phone conversation, and then the informal man-to-man talk. The official talk, I'm sure, dealt with business. Informally, did you say, "Hey, man, tough break"?
It was very clear from him to me, from me to him, that it was about a transition. It was very clear that he didn't want disruption. It was very clear that he wanted to hand over the power. There were a lot of conspiracy theories, but I can tell you and I can assure you that the interest was to hand over the power, hand over the office, and try to be as disruptive as possible. And then they just naturally gravitated towards being quicker than what we both had anticipated.
All right. So you tell me there's no kind of off-record sort of, hey, listen, off-record, I'm sorry for you and your family. I'm sorry you're here. Knowing you're known as a very compassionate guy, I've got to believe that once you got the official stuff done, at some point there was sort of an informal conversation.
Oh, no, we had informal conversations, but I think that the informal conversations that I had with him in his office at that time were more to try to reassure him that I would do whatever I needed to do to keep the city business going, and also to provide some level of support to him as a human being, because it was really very traumatic for him after all the time that he had put into that office to have to exit from that role. So this was a crisis at multiple levels. It was a crisis in leadership, in terms of transitioning, but it was also a personal crisis for him and for myself, because I now have to take my life also and turn it upside down pretty much in terms of stepping in.
You're up at 5 in the morning now instead of 8, right? It's a 3-hour day earlier.
Schedule, I'm working 16, 20 hours a day, and it's a very condensed and heavy work schedule. There is very little room for anything else other than work. Hopefully sometime later in the summer I might take a day or two off if I can.
You've known the old mayor for a long time. Personally disappointed that the city is in this spot, and personally disappointed in him?
Well, there's a lot of disappointments, but when I think of all the disappointments, it's a time to bring to mind all the different things that go into play in terms of the rise and the possible fall of anyone who's in that office. We have very entrenched sort of politics in this town that That part needs to have some revisiting. The mayor was very anxious to raise a position of power so that he can implement some changes that he wanted in educational reform and also in terms of trying to work to continue to rebuild the city. So I'm disappointed to some degree. Obviously, there's mistakes that he acknowledged that he made, and those, of course, led to his resignation. But the disappointment needs to be. I feel also disappointed at myself to some degree.
Why?
Well, I was part beneficiary of the whole movement to have this group of people come in. So I think that we need to share some of the responsibility, because this serves as an opportunity for us to strengthen our system, make the required adjustments to it. So we can't just point the finger. We all need to collectively take some responsibility and collectively try to work for a better system where that hopefully we can select the best candidate for office and not have to go through a certain process that's historical that might lend itself to getting into particular problem areas.
The issue now of corruption and what happens with the pension. Your thoughts. You're the mayor now, and you're a guy known for his integrity. Should you take away a public official's pension if they're found to be corrupt?
It's a matter of debate. I don't take any personal position of the situation. Ultimately, somewhere along the line, there might be a judge that would have to make that situation. They would have to consider his circumstances, his record of public service. They would have to take into account his wife, her disabilities, and the fact that she might have some rights to that pension. They're going to need to consider whether there's been sufficient punishment by the conviction and any possible sentence that might be imposed. So that's a decision that's not for me. That's a decision that's for a judge to make probably at some future point, and hopefully they'll consider all those factors that I've indicated.
Your guy grew up in Puerto Rico, raised in the Bronx at 7 years old, came over to Hartford. I think you're one of 6 children. There's a lot of gang influences in New York City. The family then sent you to Hartford. Walk us through that story. It's a fascinating story of how you got to Hartford in the first place in 19...
I was born in the smallest town of Puerto Rico, Maricao. It's a little coffee-growing town up in the mountains. My family, over the years, gravitated towards the cities, whether it be New York or our closest city, which is Mayagüez. So I lived there, born in Maricao, but raised till 7 years old in Mayagüez. And then we left to New York City, to the South Bronx. And I was in the South Bronx till I was 15. We got there in the middle of the riots in a hot summer. I never really adjusted.
What year?
This was about August. I remember it was mid-August. Riots were going on. The September and the cold 60s, mid-60s, and it was a very challenging and difficult time. So it really it's not a good introduction to New York City. And I came from a smaller city, so I was more used to the smaller city type of environment. And when the gang pressure was mounting for me to join, and some things were happening in the neighborhood where I lost some of my friends to gang violence, I decided that I needed to get away. And it was either Minnesota, because I had a pre-college catalog from Minnesota, or Hartford, because I had accumulated a couple of numbers from people in New York that would be available to somehow help out. So
you came here with about 30 seconds. You came here really not knowing many people here, right? And
I didn't know anyone other than this woman, Dr. Maria Bithorn, who was a professor at Capital Community College. And that was about it. I didn't know anything, although shortly after arriving, I started to catch up with people that had also migrated here from the Bronx. And afterwards, I caught up with some families that had also left the Bronx. The Bronx was burning, so there was no housing. Very little housing, a lot of violence. So a lot of people naturally gravitated. And if you study Puerto Rican migration, a lot of people use New York City as a feeder city, or Boston or Chicago, and then gravitate towards smaller cities. So that's what happened in my case.
We'll talk more about your upbringing and how you came to Hartford and sort of overcame some hurdles there when we come back, folks. Returning with the Stan Simpson Show, our special guest, the new mayor of Hartford, Pedro Segarra. We'll get his thoughts on the capital city and what's in store for you. Don't go away.